John, if you could comment on the diagnostic sort of side of this, I think it would be great.
Sure. Thank you. My name is Jon Cohen. I'm the Chief Medical Officer for Quest Diagnostics, and I'm also a vascular surgeon by training, so I actually have seen and done a lot of this for quite some time. Just to understand, currently diagnostic tests are a different regulation up till now than the device industry and pharma. When the lab develops a test, it's actually LDT, it's called a laboratory developed test. It's regulated through Medicare, CMS, through a 1988 act called CLIA, assuring that the test is accurate and reproducible. We do not measure effectiveness, which I'll get back to in a second. As Bill said, drugs and devices are regulated by the FDA. The FDA, though, has indicated that they are looking at the diagnostic industry and that they are interested in regulating laboratory tests. So I agree with Bill that we need a strong FDA as long as they don't regulate our industry. So let me go give you a little bit more data on what's happening relative to Europe and the US. This 510K process, which was mentioned, is really if you have a predicate device and you have something that's similar. It currently takes 31 months on average to get approval through the FDA for a lower moderate risk device. It takes 7 months in Europe, and it costs about $25 million, roughly. If you have a new device, this pre-market approval, PMA device that's never been approved before, it takes approximately 54 months in the US and 11 months in Europe. And it costs approximately $75 million, just so you understand the huge difference between the approval processes. So the question I had raised, or the question I'd like to answer is are the European processes achieved at the expense of patient safety? Now, I haven't heard of a lot of people dying in Europe recently from a lot of devices that are out in Europe. And are they doing something that is so egregious relative to the US with their shorter approval processes that is impacting negatively on patient care? And I have not seen that data. And I think it's an issue that we need to talk about further with the FDA about what the differences are between us and them. Quest provides physicians with access to tests that are published first, and then we develop this new test to improve patient safety. We obviously absolutely understand as a patient-centric company the need to protect the public. On the other side is we want to be able to provide these tests and new tests in a timely fashion. In some sense, we believe that actually the FDA does have a huge role in regulating specific types of tests. For instance, there's been some issue you may have seen in the press recently around genetic testing, where there are some companies who provide genetic tests directly to consumers. And that, we believe, is a problem because we don't know what patients will do with that information where a physician has not been involved in the process of ordering the test. And there has been some bad results recently of patients getting wrong genetic test information without having had a physician order it to begin with. On the other side is the really good news is on genetic testing. As you can imagine, the huge advances that have been made in just HIV, cardiovascular disease, cancer diagnosis, has all been a result mostly from laboratory-developed tests that were able to move very quickly to market to get these things in the hands of physicians. So the danger, of course, of regulation is obvious. It slows down discovery, slows down availability of new diagnostics. It would substantially decrease innovation around what we call orphan diseases. See, if you have a disease that's not that common, relatively rare, or not as common as the big ones, who's going to put the money and R&D into developing the diagnostic test and in the pharma industry, the pharmaceuticals to treat those, quote, orphan diseases? And because it becomes so expensive, it's essentially not cost effective for companies to do that. Obviously, as you've heard, it incentivizes a commercial release of testing and diagnostic tests in Europe and other countries as opposed to the US. And the question is it probably decreases the incentives for corporate academic relationships here in the US. Anecdotally, again, we have for instance, a white blood cell count device. It's a point-of-care device that sits on, it's about this big, and it sits on a shelf. We've had it in Europe for 2.5 years, where a physician could do a little prick of a person's finger, get a little drop of blood, and actually determine a white count. We will have it with a differential relatively soon. Now, that's a huge issue for physicians who are treating patients who come in with a fever, whether or not they have an infection or not. We have not been able to get it through the FDA in the last 2 years, and we're still working through it. Huge impact, for instance, on pediatricians who are taking care of kids come in, does he have the flu or they have an infection, do a white count immediately, which means you don't have to prescribe antibiotics. So that's just one example. On the other side, quite honestly, the FDA has been tremendously helpful for us and the country during the H1N1 epidemic last year. So we had the genetic code for the H1N1 virus. We went to the FDA, and within 8 weeks, we had emergency use approval from the FDA. We were able to commercialize. We were the first ones to commercialize the H1N1 diagnostic test last year. So in that sense, they were incredibly quick, incredibly effective in helping get to market something that we obviously needed. Now, I know that it's currently public, but I was looking up some of the panel stuff, and I saw that Medtronic had acquired a company called Ardian in Europe, which is a way of ablating people who have high blood pressure. Now, as a vascular surgeon, it's a big deal to operate on people with high blood pressure, and you may know that 30% of the people in the country are currently being treated for high blood pressure, and the impact of high blood pressure in this country is enormous. Stroke, cardiovascular disease, et cetera. So here they have a device that can actually possibly ablate someone with hypertension. And that's a game changer, as far as I can tell, for possible influence. Yet, it's not available in the US. So the last thing I will say is that on the political side, jobs are usually the most important issue for most political people, having been involved in that world at one point. It's really about jobs and the economy. We used to say we were shipping manufacturing jobs out of the country. We're now shipping knowledge jobs. The knowledge jobs in this country are being put out of the US. And I think we need to make that argument to the political people to understand what's happening to the economy. It's no longer that you're picking up the phone and getting a service call somewhere in some other country, or that it's easier to manufacture in China. The knowledge is actually leaving the country. So our plea is, again, is to establish a better relationship with the FDA so we can move this forward. Thanks.